Abraham. You know, for billions of people around the world, he's not just some name in an ancient book. He's the father of faith itself. But was he a real person? A man of flesh and blood who actually walked the deserts of the ancient world? Or is he maybe just a powerful myth? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig right into that question, exploring the physical evidence archaeologists have been unearthing for decades. And yeah, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? We're on the hunt for traces of one man from 4,000 years ago. I mean, we're not expecting to find his diary or a signed autograph. So what are we actually looking for? Bits of pottery? The ruins of a city? Ancient texts? And how can any of that really prove that the stories in the book of Genesis are true?
To get a handle on all this, we're going to follow a very specific trail of evidence. We'll be walking through the top 10 discoveries related to Abraham, a list put together by the Associates for Biblical Research. So what we're doing here is exploring their argument piece by piece to see what kind of case they build for the historical reliability of the scriptural account.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll set the stage for this whole archaeological quest. Then, we'll start our countdown of their top 10 discoveries, from ancient cities and big battles to cultural customs. We'll work our way all the way to the #1 piece of evidence on their list. And then, at the end, we'll ask, what's the final verdict?
Okay, before we dive into the countdown, let's just set our expectations straight. We are plunging headfirst into the Middle Bronze Age. This is a world of shifting sands, of empires just beginning to form. Finding a smoking gun for any single person from this far back, well, it's a real long shot. So our quest isn't really for Abraham's signature, but for a world that perfectly matches the one we read about in his story.
And with that, let's get this countdown started. Discoveries 10 through 7 are all about location, location, location. We're talking about the actual places Abraham is said to have lived and the battles he's said to have fought. Let's see if the ground beneath our feet tells the same story as those ancient texts.
Kicking off our list at number 10 is Abraham's hometown, the famous city of Ur. But get this, there's a little bit of a twist. There might be two of them. The one you've probably heard of is in southern Iraq, made famous by those stunning excavations back in the 1920s. But the source we're following points to a different Ur, way up in modern-day Turkey, and their reasoning is pretty fascinating. See, when Abraham sends his servant back home to find a wife for Isaac, he sends him to Haran. Now, that's a pretty reasonable trip from the northern Ur, but it's a massive, 1,000-mile journey from the one in the south. It's a geographical clue that might just change the whole picture.
From Ur, the story leads us to number 9 on the list, Haran. This is where Abraham's family settled for a while after leaving Ur. And what do we find when archaeologists dig there? Exactly what you'd expect. A bustling, ancient trade hub with huge structures that date right to the correct time period. We even find evidence of a major temple to the moon god Sin, which, fits perfectly with the biblical account of Abraham's family origins, before their call to monotheism.
Coming in at number 8, we have something really special, an ancient gate at a place called Tel Dan. Some people even call it Abraham's Gate because of its link to the story where Abraham rescues his nephew Lot. Now, let's be clear, this doesn't mean Abraham himself walked through this exact gate, but what's so cool is that it's the oldest arched gateway ever discovered, and it dates right to his era. So when you look at this, you are looking at the type of imposing, incredible architecture that would have greeted Abraham as he traveled through the land of Canaan.
Number 7 takes us to the battlefield, the Battle of Siddim from Genesis chapter 14. For a long time, a lot of scholars just dismiss this story as pure fiction. But our source makes a great point. The political landscape it describes, this messy, shifting coalition of 4 kings against 5, is a perfect match for the Bronze Age. Even the names of the kings fit the linguistic patterns of the time. It really does read like an eyewitness account.
Okay, so now we're going to shift our focus a little bit. We've looked at places, so now let's look at the people and their culture. Discoveries 6, 5, and 4 are all about the context. Does the world described in Genesis, the way people lived, the things they owned, the laws they followed, actually match what we've dug up from the ground? Let's see.
All right, at number 6, we have the great camel debate. The Bible says Abraham owned camels. It's right there. But for years, critics have said, no way, that's an anachronism. They claimed camels weren't used as pack animals until centuries later, but the evidence presented here tells a very different story. We're talking rock carvings of tethered camels, a bronze statue showing a camel with a harness, even camel bones found in domestic settings, all from around Abraham's time. It really looks like the ship of the desert was sailing much earlier than some people thought.
And that brings us to number 5, which is just a stunning piece of art that brings this ancient world to life. It's a tomb painting from a site in Egypt called Beni Hassan,
And honestly, it's like a photograph from 4,000 years ago. It shows a whole caravan of Semitic traders from Canaan making the journey to Egypt. Now, this isn't Abraham's family, of course, but it's incredible visual proof that their story of travel and trade between Canaan and Egypt wasn't just some fantasy. It was a real part of everyday life.
Number 4 is a total game changer, the Mari tablets. Just imagine finding an entire library from 4,000 years ago, because that's basically what this is. 15,000 clay tablets detailing the laws, the customs, and the daily life of people from that exact time and place. And what do they show us? Well, for one, they mention cities from Abraham's journey, like Haran. And they describe these social rules that seem like they're lifted straight from the pages of Genesis, like the whole legal drama over inheritance between a wife and a concubine's son. It's just an incredible cultural match.
We have officially reached the top 3. And these last discoveries, they're all about legacy. How was Abraham remembered? Did his life leave a mark on the land that would actually last for centuries, even millennia? Let's find out.
At number 3, we have a place of just profound, continuous memory, the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron. According to Genesis, this is the actual cave Abraham bought to bury his wife, Sarah. It then became the final resting place for him, for Isaac, for Jacob. For thousands of years, this single spot has been held sacred. The massive structure you see there today was built by Herod the Great, which is just a testament to its unwavering importance all the way through history.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second, because number 2 on this list is truly one of a kind. We're talking about a single inscription, the only known ancient text outside of the Bible to mention Abraham by name.
And here it is. This is carved on a massive temple wall in Karnak, Egypt. It was put there by Pharaoh Shoshank I, who you might know from the Bible as Shishak. He's listing all the towns he conquered in his campaign into Canaan, and right there, among them, is a place called the Enclosure of Abraham. And get this, where is this fort located? In the Negev Desert, the very same region the Bible tells us Abraham and his family called home. 1,000 years after he lived, his name was still literally carved on the map.
And that brings us to the number 1 discovery on the list. This is the capstone of the entire argument. And it's not a piece of pottery or a faded tablet, it's a place. A single piece of land where, according to the source, history, narrative, and faith all converge in the most powerful way imaginable.
The number 1 discovery, according to the Associates for Biblical Research, is a mountain. A single, solitary peak that has been the setting for some of the most dramatic and significant moments in human history. It's the one location that ties Abraham's personal story directly to the grand epic of an entire nation and ultimately multiple world religions.
That place is Mount Moriah, which we know today as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Just think about the incredible layers of history here. This is where the Bible says Abraham faced that ultimate test with his son Isaac. 1,000 years later, King David builds an altar on that very spot. And then his son Solomon builds the magnificent first temple right there, the absolute heart of the nation's faith. It's this unbroken thread of sacred history stretching across millennia, and it all starts with Abraham on that mountain.
So there you have it, the top 10 list. We've journeyed from ancient cities in Turkey and Iraq to a sacred mountain in Jerusalem. We've looked at tablets and tombs and battle records. The big question now is, what's the verdict? What does all this evidence really add up to?
Well, the conclusion from the Associates for Biblical Research is pretty clear. No, there's no single artifact with "Abraham was here" written on it. But what we do have, they argue, is a powerful cumulative case. The geography, the politics, the cultural customs, the names, the places, they all paint a picture that is remarkably consistent with the biblical narrative. And for them, all these pieces together point to a simple yet profound conclusion. The story is reliable. And that leaves us with one last question to think about. No matter what your personal beliefs are, this conversation between ancient text and modern archaeology is a fascinating one. It reminds us that these stories didn't happen in some fantasy land. They took place in a real world, with real people, real cities, and real conflicts. And it forces us all to ask, how does a piece of pottery, a crumbling wall, or a name carved in stone change the way we read and understand our own history?